the filibuster has been used to deny people's right to be a part of this democratic process, and you can go down through history, and that's what it's been all about.
The filibuster was not created as a tool to accomplish one thing or another. It was created as a tool to bring together members of different parties to find compromise and coalition.
Democrats clash over the filibuster, a legislative tool that effectively requires 60 out of 100 votes in the U.S. Senate to pass legislation amid growing calls to eliminate it. Hello and welcome to Inside America with me, Ghida Fakhry. It is a legislative procedure that was used just last week by Republican senators to block the Democrats' push for a congressional commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. A growing number of Democrats argue that the filibuster, a Senate rule that allows one or more lawmakers from the minority party to prevent or delay indefinitely a vote on a piece of legislation, is being used by Senate Republicans to obstruct President Biden's agenda. Several other progressive pieces of legislation and White House priorities, including an infrastructure bill, have been stalled in the evenly split Senate. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wrote in a letter to his Democratic caucus that Republican tactics have demonstrated, quote, the limits of bipartisanship and the resurgence of Republican obstructionism, warning that the next few weeks will be hard and will test our resolve as a Congress and a conference. Meanwhile, a coalition of progressive groups are stepping up the pressure on Senate Majority Leader Schumer to get rid of the filibuster. More than 100 groups sent a letter to the New York senator calling on the Senate Democratic caucus to eliminate the filibuster as a weapon that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell can use to block efforts to defend and strengthen our democracy and make our government work for the American people. Now, according to the U.S. Senate, a filibuster is defined as any attempt to block or delay Senate action on a bill by debating at length or by any other delaying or obstructive actions. In just a few moments, we'll be speaking with two former Senate Majority Leaders, Democrat Reid and Republican Trent Lott. But first, a recent poll shows that only 19% of Americans say they know or understand what the filibuster is and how it works, while 52% say they have heard of the filibuster but aren't very familiar with how it works. So for more now on how this legislative procedure came to be, I'm joined by Lauren Bell, Professor of Political Science and Dean of Academic Affairs at Randolph-Macon College in Virginia. She's the author of Filibustering in the U.S. Senate. Professor Bell, the vast majority of the American public, about 81%, has either never heard of the filibuster or has heard about it but isn't familiar with just how it works. It's not written in the U.S. Constitution. It is not a law. How would you describe it in very simple terms?
I think in the most basic terms, I would describe it as the right of any senator, once he or she holds the floor, to speak for as long as he or she wants. So any member of the Senate can gain control of the floor and without some pretty significant effort on the part of his or her colleagues, hold the floor indefinitely.
A growing number of young, progressive, democratic voters think that it is an archaic tool, that it is undemocratic. In your research, have both parties abused this tool in equal measure when it suited them for their own tactical advantage?
I think absolutely they have. Now, we could argue, we could parse out which party has been in power more frequently, which one has been out of power. But, you know, one of the things that I talk about in my book, Filibustering in the U.S. Senate, is the fact that the filibuster is simply another tool in the arsenal for every member of the Senate. So when they oppose a piece of legislation, the filibuster, or even as you mentioned, the threat of a filibuster, becomes a tool in the arsenal to help them try to move their own legislative agenda forward. But it certainly, from the outside, has the appearance of being an abuse of legislative privilege.
Professor Lauren Bell, thanks very much for helping us understand this. Thank you.
Thank you.
The longest single-person talking filibuster in U.S. Senate history was set in 1957 by Strom Thurmond, a senator from South Carolina who spoke on the Senate floor for 24 hours and 18 minutes against the Civil Rights Act of 1957. The legislation passed just a few hours later. Now, more recently, in 2013, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky spoke for nearly 13 hours in an unsuccessful effort to block the Senate confirmation vote on President Obama's pick to head the CIA, and in opposition to his administration's drone policy. The Senate Majority Leader at the time was Democratic Senator Harry Reid of Nevada. He served in that role from 2007 to 2015. He joins me now. Senator Reid, you said just last month, quote, "It is not a question of if the filibuster goes away, it's only a question of when." To change the filibuster, to change Senate rules, you need at least 51 out of the 100 senators to vote in favor. Democrats don't have the numbers. At least 2 of their senators have already said they want to keep the filibuster. So it is here to stay for the time being, isn't it? It isn't going away anytime soon.
Remember that the definition of legislation is the art of compromise. And all legislation is passed, with rare exception, with each side compromising. So the mere fact that right now the number's not there, that doesn't mean it's not going to have, we won't have the numbers in the near future. I predict it, and I believe this, the filibuster's on its way out. It's not a question if, it's a question when. You cannot have functioning democracy where it takes 60% of the vote to get something done. That's not democratic. And remember, the filibuster is not part of the Constitution. It's not part of the Bill of Rights, just something that the Senate developed for their own convenience. And it can move away just as quickly as it was brought into effect. And it's not as if it hasn't been changed before. I changed the filibuster, moved to change the rule. I have my majority Democrats change the rule. It was great because for the first time in the history of our country, the Republicans were filibustering Secretary of Defense. And so we moved, and it was the right thing to do. It really made Obama's Congress one of the remarkably strong, effective Congress in the history of the country.
Well, you did change the rules. You made it easier to confirm presidential appointments and judicial nominations, what was called the nuclear option. Some people have criticized you for using it. Was it a mistake not to get rid of the filibuster altogether when you had the opportunity, because the numbers are important? The Democrats, when you were Senate Majority Leader, controlled both houses of Congress with a bigger margin than they have today. They also controlled the White House. You had 55 Democratic senators back then. Today there are just 48 and 2 independents, and we know that at least 2 of them said they're not interested in ending this legislative tool.
The situation we have in Congress today changes rapidly. You know, we have elections coming 2022, which is right around the corner. And I'm confident at that time we'll have a better outlook as to what can be done with changing the filibuster.
Well, is that why some are hedging their bets, including President Biden? The White House just a few days ago saying that he doesn't have a preference about changing the rules. And we know that back in 2005, then Senator Biden said, speaking quite passionately in favor of keeping the filibuster, said this. He said, "It is not only a bad idea to end it, it disservices the country and would eviscerate the Senate." So it all sounds very politically expedient. Democrats use it when it's good for their cause, and they are ready to object to it when it doesn't serve their purpose.
Well, Senator Biden, President Biden, Senate for 60 years, I'm sorry, for 36 years. He was vice president for 8, and he knows the process as well as anyone. And right now, I guarantee you that he wishes that we had the votes to get the filibuster done away with. His agenda would move along more quickly, there would be more robustly, and it's just got to take place. But it can't happen if people don't understand the emergency that's facing us.
But it does seem convenient for Democrats, who do tend to speak in very moralistic terms, to speak against the filibuster when it does suit them, because also in 2005, then Senator Obama said ending the filibuster allows one party to change the rules in the middle of the game so that they can make all the decisions while the other party is told to sit down and keep quiet. Just last year, President Obama changed his tune and is now calling it a relic of a racist era. So which is it? Why is it convenient to end it now when it wasn't back then, just 8 years ago?
Times change. I think what Obama said at that John Lewis speech was really important. It was part of the days of the South and all their segregationist ideas and views. And it's, good. I'm glad he said that. It's a step in the right direction for sure. And it's always remarkable to understand there's not been a president in the history of this country who can communicate better than President Obama.
But Senator, you say times change, and I think you're alluding also to this hyper-partisan political atmosphere that we see in Washington. But when you were Senate Majority Leader, there was also a huge polarization. Right-wing Tea Party populists were on the rise during Obama's second term. It's not a new phenomenon, is it?
Not at all. If you look at Congress any given year, there's controversy going on. That's what it's about. That's the United States Congress. It was set up by the Founding Fathers to be just what it is, a place where you bring ideas to the public. They were had so much wisdom. House of Representatives, elected every 2 years, Senate 6 years, bicameral legislature. I think that what we have is reality. And you can't look at what happened in 1990 and see it's going to be the same in 2022.
But didn't you and the Democratic leadership contribute to this reality in many respects, to this hyper-partisanship that we see today, where the Senate is virtually paralyzed on all major issues?
I first came to Congress in 1982, and the press was rife with charges of polarization between the parties. That's the way it is. You pick any time in the history of this country, and the press is looking at something to write about. And I think it's important that we understand that because I took a position on a certain issue back in 1990 doesn't mean it's the same in 2022.
But if the filibuster, Senator Reid, empowers the minority party and acts as a check on majority power, as many people contend, wouldn't Democrats regret not having the protections of a filibuster the next time that they find themselves in the minority?
I think that what McConnell has done in the Senate, when they were in power, the only thing they did is have the Senate a manufacturing site for judges. I'm glad to see that my friend Trent Lott is going to be on this show with me. Trent was somebody that I enjoyed working with. He was extremely conservative, but Trent Lott was always pragmatic. He wanted to get things done. You can't have stalemates. You must be pragmatic. As Trent Lott was, you need to move forward and get things done.
But are we seeing enough pragmatic senators today? Some Democrats say bipartisanship isn't dead. Do you buy that? Can you ever get 10 Republican votes on any piece of legislation to move along President Biden's agenda?
I think it'd be very difficult. However, I do say this. I think that the fact that we have a Senate that's evenly divided, I think that it causes people to try to come together. I think that I don't think you get 10 Republicans for anything at this stage of our history. But I think that what Senator Schumer is doing is going to have some test votes. I think he's going to show that Republicans won't agree to anything. I believe in a strong two-party system. America is envy of the rest of the world because it was so easy to form governments. It's not like the parliamentary systems where they take 15 parties, 8 parties, 9 parties to have a government. We don't do that. We form a government very quickly and move on with the agenda of our country.
But do you think keeping the filibuster finally, just very briefly, undermines American democracy?
I think the filibuster undermines American democracy.
All right. Former Senate Majority Leader Reid, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah.
And now for a Republican perspective on this debate, I'm joined by former Republican Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott. He served as senator from Mississippi from 1989 till 2007. Senator Lott, you favor keeping the filibuster in its current form. Democrats say it's been abused by Republicans in the Senate. Why are you and the leadership of your party today so opposed to ending the filibuster and moving to simple majority rule? Why not pass legislation with 51 of the 100 Senate votes instead of 60?
Well, the Senate used to be referred to as the greatest deliberative body in the world, which means a lot of discussion, a lot of talk. The filibuster goes back to the very beginning of 1789, and it's been described as a protector of political minorities from the tyranny of the majority. And if you go back and look at the history going back through the last century and beyond, the party that's in the majority complains about the minority filibustering or talking bills, if you will, to death. And that's why over a period of time, they started the cloture, so-called Rule 22, where you can actually end debate if you can get first 2/3 vote of the Senate. Now it's 3/5. So if you get 60 of the 100 senators, you can end a filibuster. But one of the great things about the filibuster is it forces members of both parties to work together to get a resolution that the American people can broadly be supportive of.
Senator, that might be the case in theory. We're told that it promotes bipartisanship and, as you say, protects the rights of the minority party. But in practice, it's a tool that's been used to obstruct legislation, regardless of how popular it is with the American public. We saw that just last week when Republicans blocked the creation of a congressional commission to investigate the January 6th riots.
That's right, because there was no need for that commission. I mean, the FBI has been investigating it. We've got committees of Congress investigating it. It was a political tool that came out of the House of Representatives, that hot body, where the Speaker, under control of the Rules Committee, can ram anything through by whatever vote she wants or he wants when they're Speaker. And the Senate was always to be the saucer that cooled the hot drink that came across from the House. You know,
well, you say, Senator,
because,
you say it's a political tool, but just on the eve of that vote, a poll showed that a majority of American voters actually supported, either somewhat approved of this commission or strongly approved of it. Here are the numbers: 56% of Americans approved of it, only 29% were opposed to it. So are you really voting in line with the will of the majority of the American public?
You know, this is a Republican form of government, and you're sent to Washington to learn the issues and vote on behalf of the people. On occasion, I voted against what the popular position was in my district. I voted for a separate Department of Education. My constituents didn't agree with that, 56-44. And I wrote a newspaper column and said, this is why I voted this way. And, you know, I never heard any more complaints about it. Just because something is popular temporarily doesn't mean it's the best interest of the country in the long term. So,
but are you saying that the will of the majority of the American public doesn't really matter, that the Senate can go its own separate way?
No, it does matter, but it shouldn't necessarily be determinative.
Let me ask you.
People would like to have everything free. Oh my goodness, yes. Just, you know, take everything you want from the productive society and give it away. That's not smart, but it could be popular.
But Senator, let me ask you, what is fundamentally wrong with majority rule? The Senate already tilts Republican. Small red states, like yours, Mississippi, with a population of less than 3 million, have the same number of senators, too, as California, a blue state that almost has 40 million people. So the numbers in the Senate work in your favor. Why is your party fearful of simple majority rule?
Well, as a matter of fact, I was majority leader and whip in the Senate 2 different times. We had filibusters, we had cloture votes, but we got things done on defense and education and, Medicare, health of people. We got things done, but we worked together. We were forced to work together because if we didn't, some enterprising senator would take the floor and start talking and asking questions. Now, one of the problems that has developed is now I call them sort of filibusters. Senators will object to proceeding unless they're given notice so they can come and talk, and it's just all stopped. Nobody actually comes to the floor and debates the issue, which I think it would be one reform they might want to consider. So I'm not opposed to some reforms that we should consider. I am, for instance, I've been always for eliminating the filibuster of the motion to proceed, which means you don't even want to get on the bill to debate it. So there are some changes that can be made, but again, the filibuster protects the minority from the tyranny of the majority.
But doesn't it lead to paralysis, though? We saw. Doesn't it lead to political obstructionism? Should legislation continue to be held? Should it continue to be held up by 10 Republican senators, as is the case today?
No, it actually forces people to sit down and talk. They're talking right now about infrastructure. Well, President Biden, a lot of Democrats want to include a lot of things that are not considered infrastructure. And then you got to debate how to pay for it. If you had just a 50-vote majority required, they could probably just ram it through, even though it would have tax consequences and all kind of negative effects. By forcing it to be discussed with the president and between the Democrats and Republicans, you get a result which is then broadly supported by the American party, people, regardless of party.
But is it okay for the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, today to, as he admitted, hold up 395 House bills that are sitting in the Senate? He said just last February, and there could be more today, he said, we're not going to pass those. Is that okay? Isn't that obstructionism?
No, that's okay.
It's okay.
I might not agree with it on all of them, but the House just kicks everything imaginable over because they've got, the Rules Committee. And remember, I was in the House for 16 years. I was a whip in the House. I know how it works. But the House just pops stuff out, and the Senate is supposed to say, wait a minute. Let's look at the problems here. Let's smooth out the rough edges. And that's the way it has worked over the years. I mean, we've got a lot of things done, and yet we've always had the filibuster. Why now, after 250 years, are we just going to throw it out the window? It's worked. You need to work to make it work, though.
But if it really was such a critical feature, though, Senator, why wasn't it in the Constitution? Why didn't the framers of the Constitution think it was enough? Why did they think it was enough to have two chambers?
Well, some people think, that it was a mistake to give every senator just 2 senators. There was a reason for that. You already pointed out, I represented, 3 million, and the senators from California, 40 million or whatever. But it was employed early on in the Senate, as I said, and it was used many times over the years, but also over the years when it was critical for the country, the filibuster was broken with a vote on cloture, which then could move it through with only 51 votes.
How do you, Senator, respond to the growing criticism, certainly among Democrats and progressives, about the filibuster being a tool that was traditionally used in favor of segregationist policies? I know you yourself had to resign from your position as majority leader after praising Senator Storm Thurmond, a segregationist who famously tried to filibuster the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which was aimed at protecting the voting rights of African Americans. How do you respond to this criticism that it has a racist past and should be done away with?
Well, as a matter of fact, you'll remember most of those people that were using it in those days were Democrats. And when they passed the Civil Rights Bill under the leadership of the Republican leader, Eric Dirksen, they gave the Republican votes to help get it passed. So you talk about a double standard. All of a sudden, they're pure in this area. And remember, they did get cloture in, I guess, 1975 to move the Civil Rights Bill or whatever the date was, but they got it done. It wasn't easy. But they had reached a point where there was agreement it needed to be done.
All right, Senator, we'll have to leave it there.
All right.
Senator Trent Lott, former Senate Majority Leader, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you.
Now, despite the growing calls among Democrats and progressives to scrap the filibuster, the prospect of ending it remain as dim today as they ever were, with Republicans fiercely opposed to it and Democrats publicly feuding over it. Its staunch defenders argue that this archaic Senate rule, which was romanticized in the 1939 movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, is a way to ensure civility and collaboration across the aisle while protecting the rights of the minority party. Its detractors take a far more cynical view, vilifying it as an undemocratic tool seeped into the racial history of the U.S.'s civil rights era, a tool that was once used by segregationist lawmakers to block the voting rights of minorities. While both parties have used it for their own short-term political advantage, Woodrow Wilson's warning almost 100 years ago still rings true today. The Senate of the United States, he said, is the only legislative body in the world which cannot act when its majority is ready for action. And so, in short, while ending the filibuster remains a rallying call for many here in the United States, its longevity is testament to the enduring structural inequalities built into the U.S. Senate. If the odds of changing the fundamental power imbalance and outsized influence of sparsely populated red states are slim, then the odds of removing the filibuster, a bargaining tool used by some of their representatives to wield power in the Senate, are even slimmer. That's all from me, Ghida Fakhry, from all of us here in Washington. Thanks for watching.